Welcome back to another edition of Give Me Some Truth. Today we have Mitch and Clint and myself in the booth talking about state of Wisconsin and UW system employee benefits. I know that it doesn't sound like the most exciting topic in the world, but it definitely has some confusion around it, or at least the people that we talk to that have these benefits. We were hoping to clear up some of that confusion today and make it easier to understand if you get paid by one of these two institutions. So first off, Mitch, you kind of quarterback this, so let's talk a little bit about just kind of the basics. We kind of refer to the system as a three-prong approach. Maybe kind of define what that is and just some of the basics of each one.
Yeah, so it's common for people in Madison to say, I work for UW, let's say, or UW Health.
Sure.
And that can mean a lot of different things. So, for example, my wife works for hospitals and clinics. So that's one area, right? So a lot of people would call that UW Health, for example. Some are professors at University of Wisconsin-Madison, let's say, and they might have access to other retirement plans. And then the foundation comes into play, then the medical foundation. And I'm not saying all this to confuse people. It's just to say that there's a lot of different complexity. And depending on how you're paid, there's going to be different options available to you from a retirement standpoint through your employer. And sometimes people get confused because they say, oh, well, I'm in the state pension.
Yep.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you could be doing? Is the pension enough? Yes or no, right? So there's a lot of different factors that go into this conversation. And then also we try to help take the complexity and then boil it down into, okay, maybe here are the 2 or 3 things you really need to be focusing on, or maybe even here's the one thing that you need to be utilizing through your employer, whether it's hospitals and clinics, whether it's, someone that's at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, et cetera.
So you mentioned that there's the pension, but then there's 2 other options that a lot of people, maybe not everybody, have available to them, but a fair number of people that work in those 2 institutions.
Yeah, so the other 2 that we see are a 403B. And most university type employers have this, right? So whether you're at Wisconsin or whether you're in Michigan or whether you're in Minnesota or wherever, right? There's going to be a 403B option more than likely available to you. And then there's also a deferred compensation plan. So in Wisconsin here, it's called the Wisconsin Deferred Comp Plan. It's through Empower, and that's a 457 plan. So some people have access to all 3 of those things. Mm-hmm. And then it's a matter of, well, what do I prioritize? What makes the most sense for my situation? There's pros and cons of each. Some people can participate in all 3, actually, which is one little tidbit that a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm already maxing out my 403B, so I can't use my 457. Well, that's incorrect, actually. You can use both. And some people find that as a surprise, almost say, oh, holy cow, I've been missing out on making additional tax advantage contributions for years.
Right.
And so sometimes even just pointing out that you do have more at your fingertips potentially than you previously thought.
And possibly even double that if you have both people working in the household for those institutions. So it's incredibly powerful. So a plug for Clint Walkner's experience, but more so to poke fun at his age. How long have you been working with state of Wisconsin people?
I could be really vague and say since I was 22.
Okay.
But,
sure. Which would be what then, 8 years?
Yeah. A couple years. Something like that. So, I've been working when I first started my career, I worked for a tiny division of MetLife, and we helped school teachers and administrators generally. So I've been working inside of the system for a really, really long time, and mostly working with people on the 403B side. And so the 403B plan through the state of Wisconsin has changed a ton, particularly over the last few years, because what used to happen is that they had all these different companies that you could elect to go with. And it's a little different from a 401k plan. So in 401k plans, usually you have one provider. So it could be for example, Fidelity. Okay,
that your employer would pick.
That your employer picks. And they have a committee, and they pick one, and then they pick funds. And they're supposed to be kind of the fiduciary of the plan, right? They're the plan sponsor is, Fidelity in this group, and then you just do that, and you review that over time, and you have one choice. And you commonly get a match. Well, in this plan, it's totally different because in many cases, you're allowed a bunch of different providers. And so they get on this list, and some of them, are buddies with the district manager and all this, and they get these payroll slots and everything like that. And so they get into it. Well, for the state of Wisconsin plan, they had that, and then they started to standardize more. And so they went down and they basically created, okay, we're going to have 2 plans that are almost the exact same, and we're going to have 2 companies run that.
Within the 403B.
Within the 403B.
Right.
So that's a TIAA, which used to be TIAA-CREF, now it's just TIAA, and then it's Fidelity.
Yep.
And so what they did was they standardized the fund lineup, and they basically said, you guys can administrate that, and they get paid for the administration of that. But really, they took away a lot of like the Fidelity funds, they took away a lot of the TIAA funds, and they just kind of removed a lot of the conflicts of interest that exist in some of these plans.
Yeah.
And so because they had so many in both of those different buckets, those are really the 2 highest providers. Because they did that, I think that's why they just elevated those 2 companies to do it. And they're good administrators. The main difference between those 2 plans is that TIAA offers a fixed account that's also known as a TIAA traditional, which is a great fit for some people that want something that's conservative and fixed. And they used to have a lockup period with it. They no longer have that in the plan. So it's actually a really attractive option for people that want a bond alternative that's fixed, that's guaranteed. We don't get to say that very often. That's a guaranteed rate. And I know, right?
Yeah, we can say that.
I'm the compliance
insurance company.
Yeah. I think you can say
TIAA
that.
is in the insurance realm, right? So you're transferring the risk essentially.
Right.
And it used to be in the form of illiquidity. That was your trade-off, but that's changed.
Yeah.
And that's kind of across the board, whether it's TIAA and Fidelity also actually has a guaranteed product, but it's far inferior. The 1, 3, 5, and 10-year interest paid on it is worse than TIAA.
And so we have a lot of, and actually TIAA works really well with financial advisors too. We have a bunch of our clients where we can actually go in and affect change in those portfolios. So it's a lot friendlier towards financial advisors. So for the couple reasons, we usually favor the TIAA plan over Fidelity.
Well, you and I have been working with these plans for a long time. You significantly longer than me because you're a lot older than I am. By
so
6
much
months.
older.
By 6 months. 10 years ago to today, the 403B plan as a whole, significantly better, in our opinion,
much better
than it was for the end user. Right?
Yes.
Simpler, cleaner, just and just gotten rid of a lot of the clutter. Just a much better plan. And I don't think you and I ever thought that it would get to this spot where it is now because the money involved and, like you said, the kind of pay to play aspect of it. It's pretty surprising that it's gotten to this point.
It takes a long time to make changes in these plans because there are a lot of conflicts of interest and a lot of companies that want to be part of this plan because there's a lot of participants. A lot of opportunity for investment managers to be a part of this process. Yeah. So I'm happy to see where it's at. I think that TIAA does a great job on that. Fidelity is good for people that want to self-manage and maybe use their brokerage window.
Sure.
So if you're pretty savvy, very few people use the brokerage window inside of the plan. You look at the statistics, it's a minuscule amount of the participants, but some people want to buy some individual stocks and things like that, and that will get them access to some of those like ETFs and things like that inside of the plan. So there are some inherent advantages of those, but by and large, it's good enough for people to use like a TIAA in their standard stock or even Fidelity in their standard stock fund lineup. They're very inexpensive and they offer a wide variety of diversification options inside of the plan.
Yeah.
So 403B, the one thing about that's different from most 401k plans, there's no match. So it does we'll talk in a minute about why you may not want to be in the 403B plan. And so I think that brings up one thing. Why would you favor, say, you have the ability to go into the 457 plan?
Yeah.
And so, Mitch, why do you think we would potentially go into a 457 plan situation versus a 403B?
Yeah, so the 457, one of the big things that I talk about with clients is that if you were to change jobs, let's say, you can actually access that money, even though you probably earmarked it for retirement. It's part of your retirement plan and retirement savings, but you can access it without the 10% penalty, right? So whether we're talking IRAs or 401ks, kind of the standard rule of thumb is don't touch your retirement money until after 59 and a half. Otherwise, you're dinged with a 10% penalty upon distribution. And that's not the case with the 457. And a 457, in a lot of ways, there are similarities. That's one of the big differences compared to the 403B. But you can also do Roth, whether you can do Roth 403B, Roth 457. So you have some options too within, hey, how am I actually making these contributions? Am I doing it on a tax deferred basis? Am I doing a Roth 457? And then it's just one of those nice to have in case you need to access the money for whatever reason, right? You can access it through the 457. You might look there first, if you're under 59 and a half, before you would your 403B money, for example.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets us into our next level, next level of conversation, which was, let's talk about the basics, and now let's talk about kind of strategery.
I love that. Was that a George W?
I think it was. Yeah, it was.
Strategery was George W. Bush.
But it almost should just be part of the lexicon now because it's so good.
It's got to be in the dictionary at this point, right?
Yeah. There is a lot of kind of thought and planning that needs to go into this because, to your point, with these two tools, if you want to look at them that way, you can hypercharge Roth savings. You can really drive down your taxable income. You can have one. If there's two people in the household that have them available, one can do one strategy, the other can do a different strategy. So I guess talk a little bit in terms of strategy and how we guide clients through these decisions with these accounts. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe not for everybody, right? But for the people that are out there that want to understand the full depth and breadth of the options within these plans, kind of how far can we push these envelopes, if you will? Yeah,
it's actually a lot of exciting opportunities. I don't remember as Clint or Nate kind of said that, well, it might be not the most exciting topic, but it actually can be from a planning perspective because whether it's a single household or a married couple, for example, in my personal household, my wife has access to the hospitals and clinics 403B. She's part of the state pension. She's part of the deferred compensation. And for us, we chose based on our situation that, well, there's no choice really in the pension, right? There's the 6.85% or whatever it was this past year. That just happens, right? And then she's doing the deferred compensation plan. And part of the reason was because of what I just said earlier, right?
Sure.
No 10% penalty in case you were to need to access it. And then we just chose not to participate in her 403B, right? And part of that's a function of she works part-time and she's not a high income earner. So there's only so much that you can actually do. You need to have the wages to contribute to these plans. But let's say and we have lots of clients like this where there's husband, wife, let's say, or spouse one, spouse two, and they're both part of the UW in some way, shape, or form, and they have two pensions, they have access to two 403Bs, and two deferred compensation plans. Holy cow, you can load
IRAs.
up. Oh, and IRAs and brokerage, right? So what I'm getting at is there are some couples that might be very high income earners. There's all sorts of wages, and you can defer almost $100,000 basically between the spouses, if that makes sense for you. And depending on tax bracket, and if you're a high income earner, you might be wanting to defer more than Roth. It depends, of course, right? But I think our role in that is to figure out, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, maybe it's retire at 62, maybe it's retire at 65, maybe it's 55. So depending on that, are you actually putting enough towards your retirement? Because usually the state pension's not enough. It can be for some, depending on lifestyle. Usually the pension's not enough. From there, then, it can be kind of fun determining which lever are we pulling. Because some of the other little things that sometimes don't get realized are there's like 403B and 457 special catch-up provisions where if you've neglected to save via those vehicles, you can actually do kind of a catch-up and turbocharge your savings that way too. If you're playing catch-up maybe in your 50s later in life, closer towards retirement. So there's some exciting opportunities that you can turbocharge that way as well.
In the last few minutes that we have, Clint, why don't we talk about ETF and just explain kind of basics of what that is. People know it as ETF, WRS, their pension account. I have that pension thing, right? I mean, we've heard it described in many, many different ways. Incredibly powerful tool for for retirement planning. Why don't we just talk briefly about what that is, and maybe if we can just fit in a minute or two on sick leave conversion, possibly just a nod to that as well.
Okay, We'll see what I can get done quickly.
Because Courtney's given me, we're up against it, so
right.
it's kind of a speed round here.
Well, she put a clock in the room, and this changed everything now. So we got to always be.
Well, because you and I are competitive now, so it's like, okay, she knew how to get done what she wanted.
Before you finish this podcast too, I want to talk about whether those are jeans or twill pants, and I think you actually wore jeans today.
I think they're jeans.
I think it's going to be yet to be determined.
Which Nate Condon wearing jeans is a big moment. So
I think I'm going to call them dungarees is what I'm going to call them.
Dungarees and on a Give Me Some Truth podcast. This is a first. So
well, and this is a nod to my son who likely won't be listening to it, but that's okay. They're not as tight as Kramer's dungarees, which is good because that led to some problems. So
all right, back to the pension plan. Yes. Basically what happens is, it's a non-elective, as Mitch alluded to earlier, non-elective contribution that you have to make to this pension plan. And so you accrue these years of service over time. And once you get over 5, you're basically in the pension system. You're going to receive a pension payout at some point.
You lose the ability to roll the balance out.
Correct.
Yep.
And so you have an employer and employee side of the plan, and it just stays there and grows over time. And so as you put in those years of service, it's really tied to your years of service times a factor of your age, and then times the high 3 years of your salary. That's the basic calculation. That's what most people use. There's another component to it, which depends on how well the pension system does in investing. And so you can look at your pension statement and see a couple different those. There's like this money purchase balance, and then there's this formula benefit balance. And most people focus on the formula benefit because it's a little bit more conservative and a little bit easier to project out.
And you get the higher of the two.
So it's great. So the formula benefit is usually what we do when we do pension calculations for our clients. That's what we'll work on. And the high 3 years, trying to make those as high as possible is really important. And then where you retire is important too, because there's an age reduction factor. So, it's really tied to, a retirement age. And then you can, monkey with that a little bit with years of service. If you have a lot of years of service, that age reduction actually comes down, and there's a big table that you can look at for this. So basically, the number of years you are in there, the greater the number of years, the greater those high 3 years, the greater your pension's going to be. It's a great plan. It's really well run too. It's basically 99% funded the last time I checked statistics, so that's great. And then if you stay in the system a long time, you have this sick leave conversion. So most people don't use a lot of their sick leave, and so there's a conversion to healthcare dollars that you get to use, and it's a wonderful benefit there. If you stay there, for many people, if you stay there a long time, you actually get a sweetener where it's not really a doubler, but it kind of doubles, and you have this bank that's bigger too. You have to stay there 15 consecutive years to get that in most cases. Saying this all caveated, you should check with your benefits office, but this is great and very powerful for people that retire early sometimes, and gets them to, maybe Medicare age. If they want to retire at 55, it bridges that gap if they are super early in the system, or it's for people that, might last their entire retirement. We have people that have banks that are just basically never going to run out, and they're going to have healthcare paid for them. And for that, it's a wonderful benefit because it's, healthcare is expensive as we get older, and it becomes your Medicare Part B and D sort of thing in that situation. So wonderful benefit inside of there. And then I want to spend the final minute talking about and posing the question to either one of you, why would you just do a Roth IRA instead of the 403B or 457? Where's the time when you'd probably do that?
Yeah, I guess you want to grab that one?
I don't care. I think we both were, breathing into spit some knowledge
our
here.
inner Alicia. I'm excited about that topic.
I can
Go
take
ahead, please.
Yeah, so Roth IRA might be for someone that maybe just started out of college, let's say, or earlier on in their career. Maybe their earnings aren't super high yet, and they're eligible to directly contribute to a Roth IRA. Typically, you're going to have a lot more investment options with a Roth IRA. So you might say, okay, I'm in the pension plan that happens automatically like we discussed. And then you're saying, well, 403, 457, should I use one of those? Well, it might make sense to do the Roth IRA. You're going to have more investment options. It might be less expensive, right? That's kind of it depends. It might be less expensive. But then also when it comes to, again, where if you might need to access the money, right? It's pretty easy to access what you've contributed. And then there's a 5-year rule and some rules around accessing money. But you can access your contributions anytime. penalty free, basically.
Which is better than if you're in a 403B plan.
Which is
Even if
better.
you're in the Roth 403B, it's more locked up. So the Roth
Correct.
IRA gives you a lot more liquidity.
Correct. So again, you don't want to put money into a vehicle like the Roth IRA just saying, oh, I can rip it out, next year. That's not the intent. It's not the intent, but it's just one of those things that's kind of a nice to have in case something comes up.
And I think that kind of proves the complexity of the cases that we run into of people that either have one spouse or both spouses working for the state of Wisconsin or UW. With great benefit, if you will, comes more complexity, and getting it right is important. So for us, with our clients that we work with, we spend a lot of time planning around these topics and around these accounts that people have available, and it really means that the retirement at the end can be so much more fruitful if they do it correctly. And I think that for us is what we want to try to drive home today is if you have these available to you, feel free to give us a call or sit down with us. We'll go through what those mean for you specifically. And once again, thanks for listening to Give Me Some Truth.
Walkner Condon Financial Advisors is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The opinions expressed by the participants of this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Walkner Condon Financial Advisors. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Thanks for listening, and for further information, please visit WalknerCondon.com.